At the end of your life, what will be your legacy? What will you leave behind for future generations? For the world, join the World Messenger, Izabela Lundberg, each week as she brings you a new distinguished guest from the business, sports, or entertainment world to share their success, their struggles, and their lessons. They will share their insights into current hot topics that affect everyone. Izabela facilitates an intimate, vulnerable environment to find the true value of humanity and real leadership. Are you ready for your legacy? The legacy that matters?
Hello, my beautiful friends. It's Izabela Lundberg here, the World Messenger, and I have a very special guest here today, back in my own backyard here in Denver, Colorado, joining me on today's show on the legacy leaders, right? We cannot wait to depict some of the amazing accomplishments, but also such a timely, relevant information that you guys absolutely cannot afford to miss. He's CEO of Influence Board, chairman of CXO, founder of the HR 100 and the CFO 100. He's also absolute executive that I had a chance to see his trajectory here in state of Colorado and beyond in last decade. And it's amazing to see what's possible. And also, guys, wanted to share with you, he's someone that I have tremendous respect, and you will see why. But he is also super cool and awesome. He's not just those innovative techies. He likes to collect exotic reptiles, believe it or not. And he also likes to collect military vehicles. I'm really intrigued about that. So without further ado, please allow me to introduce you to Jay Allen. Jay, how are you?
Doing great. Thanks, Izabela, for allowing me on the show today.
Absolutely. I know you're extremely busy and your time is very valuable. So I want to make sure that audience get the most in this power hour with you. So again, I'm honored to have you. And before we dive into and unpack so many amazing things you are doing that are propelling and moving things forward in this very challenging time for so many, I just want to ask you, Jay, do you mind sharing just a bit where you originally from, where you were raised, and how did you stumble upon passion for technology and innovation?
Yeah, I grew up in Colorado. At the age of 19, I went on a mission for my church to Monterrey, Mexico, for 2 years. So learned to speak Spanish, fell in love with the Latin American culture, returned back to the States and got a degree in international marketing, hoping. I also learned French when I came back, so I was hoping to do something international with my marketing degree. Yeah, I mean, I'm just a Colorado boy. I moved around a little bit after graduation, but we moved back here to raise our 5 kids. We've been back for about 30 years.
Wow, congratulations. And I honestly didn't know that you're Colorado native. That's even better. I mean, that's amazing. That's even better to have sense of like why you're so passionate about making the Colorado a great state and everything you've been doing in the last 30 some years here. So, guys, this is a living example that you can learn the other languages. And obviously those languages come handy, don't they?
Yes, I've used Spanish more than anything else. Just even in the grocery store, helping somebody that doesn't speak good English. I'm glad I learned Spanish. I haven't used French as nearly as much.
Okay, that's fantastic. But now with being back to Colorado and raising your family, you also start really working on some amazing projects. I feel like you are a phenomenal mind who identify problem and then finds a great solution. So one of the things that I am looking at here is obviously you're chairman of CXO, and something that I found to be tremendously valuable. So do you mind sharing for our audience that is not familiar, what did you create there and how did you unpack the need and how this became so impactful beyond Colorado?
Yeah, it started, I was working for a corporate venture organization. And so I needed to develop relationships with C-level executives of billion-dollar companies that would ultimately be our clients. and had lunch with a few high-level executives that I knew in town, and just looking for their advice, and asked them, hey, where do you go to grow your network of other C-level executives? And I was kind of surprised when they all kind of chuckled and said, we don't. There was a sense of frustration among them that when they went to a networking event they got invited to, 80% of the people in the room wanted to hand them a resume or sell them something. And it made extracting value from that interaction difficult. And so they would try to sit on boards and things of that nature, but that really wasn't solving their problem either. One of the executives at that lunch 20 some odd years ago said something so profound that I never forgot it. And it was the kernel that really drove the formation of CXO. He said, I really have two problems, Jay. Problem one is, if I made a list of the 50 people I really needed to know in town, and then went to networking events that I get invited to, I'd never meet those 50 people. And problem number two is, I don't know who should be on the list of the 50 people I really need to know in town.
Wow, that is powerful. And guys, Denver is not that big, but yet it is getting bigger and grew since then, and got more mighty, right? But imagine having that difficult and challenge 20 some years ago. And what happened?
Yeah, I said, well, I bet we can each come up with 10 people we'd like to know in town. So we made a short list right there around lunch of some people we would like to develop relationships with. And I reached out to every one of the people on that list and said, hey, there's these executives that want to grow their network of other influential people in town. They're hoping you could, join them for lunch someday. No vendors, no speakers, nobody's going to sponsor the meal. Everyone's just going to pay their own lunch. They just want to break bread, get to know each other, find ways to help each other. And what I discovered in those phone calls was virtually every executive responded with the answer, this is a great idea. I have the same problem. So who's coming? And no vendors, and I'm paying for my own lunch. Count me in. And they all showed up. And that was the beginning of CXO.
Wow, that is brilliant. I mean, networking, so much change. And I have to say, I used to get these trainings and people telling me how to network, what to do. And so many things were so horribly going wrong and wrong advice. So I was like, oh my God, you need to create a book or booklet of how to network and what is important, because honestly, people are mistaking what networking is all about, specifically right now as we're doing things virtually. So if you don't mind, just expand a little bit more on that story and fast forwards to current events.
Yeah, it was never my intent when this all started to create a networking organization. What happened was really organic. Within 6 months or so, there was 100 executives asking me when the next lunch was. And I was trying to manage this on an Excel spreadsheet in my spare time, and realized we had created a monster. So we hired some administrative support. We set up a website. We did not have dues for the first 7 years. I mean, this was never about making money, which is why we were able to keep the vendor influences out. But it did reach a point where I was spending 30 grand a year out of pocket for administrative support and a membership management platform that we had purchased and other things. And I finally said, hey, you guys are chipping in. So we set up, dues were, I think, $399 a year if you wanted to pay them. Nobody got kicked out for non-payment. So they weren't mandatory, but we were able to bring in enough to kind of get the organization to break even, which is what I needed. It kept growing. It's, arguably one of the largest networks of influential people in Colorado today. heads of private equity and venture capital, political leaders, senior officers of major companies, former bachelors from the show The Bachelor, astronauts
I'm
that have
missing
spent,
out then each time.
it really is a hodgepodge of really interesting people. And in 20 years of running the organization, we literally have had no content in 20 years. I jokingly tell people when they join that we commit firmly to teach you nothing, because that's not our mandate. We exist to help influential people grow their network of other influential people in very informal settings. We were doing, up until COVID, we were doing, 2 events a month, 20 people maximum. The members took turns hosting at their offices, and you'd spend the whole hour and a half lunch just getting to know everybody around the table and finding ways to help each other. That was the only outcome we were looking for from these events.
Wow, that is unbelievable. I just keep being, I knew some of the stats, but I just didn't know the magnitude of that. And what I'm really curious now, Jay, with everything being virtual, obviously, how is networking happening now with this particular group? And what advice you can give? Because so many people are reaching out specifically for, let's say, through the LinkedIn, right? Wanted to connect or wanted to share what they have to offer. People immediately kind of jumping into that sale mindset versus service versus value. And you are being consistently promoting and creating so much value over the years. And I first of all wanted to say thank you on my behalf and on behalf of Coloradans who had a tremendous benefit from it. But with that mindset, do you mind just through that lens share something that others can really learn and understand how networking truly actually work?
Yeah, and quite honestly, I take a very different approach to networking than 99% of the people out there. A handful of times I've been asked to speak about networking or train people on networking inside corporate environments, and I did it for free. I mean, it's just a topic I'm passionate about. But the first thing I ask them is, when you hear the words "you should be networking more," what does that activity look like to you? And almost universally, everyone in the room cringes and says, it means going to an event where there's 200 people I don't know and walking up to strangers and introducing myself and hoping good things happen. And they all hate that. It's like, I don't want to do more networking. That's uncomfortable to me. And so ironically, I tell them, I'm going to help you network better. And the first thing I want you to do is stop going to those events. And they kind of scratch at first, you get a heavy sigh, oh, good, I don't have to do that anymore. But they also scratch their head, well, how am I going to network? And the approach I took when everything changed for me as far as value of networking is when I sat down and said, what am I trying to accomplish professionally or personally? And who are the individuals uniquely suited to help me on that journey? And then I made a list of those people. And then I said, okay, these are the people I need to develop relationships with. If I go to some networking event, great, I hope one of them shows up and I hope I stumble into them. That's not a good strategy. So I would get a list of at least 10 and I would call them all up and invite them to lunch to meet each other. And because they all had the problem of, I don't know who I need to meet in town, and I don't know how to meet those people, I was immediately solving a problem for them. So, an example I give is I created this group of the CFOs of the billion-dollar companies in town, and it was super easy. I called them up and said, hey, the other CFOs of the billion-dollar companies in town want to grab lunch just to get to know each other a little bit better. And they were hoping to include you. Is there any way you can break away and join them? And they felt, wow, the other CFOs want to include me and they want to just spend time getting to know each other. And 99% of the CFOs said yes to that message and showed up. So when you make a list of the people you really need to develop a relationship with, odds are they have similar characteristics. They're influential in some way. They're doing interesting and amazing things. And odds are those 10 people would like to meet each other because they all have those attributes. And odds are they've probably never met each other. And so suddenly you're becoming an introduction facilitator, a networking facilitator to help them meet interesting people without the encumbrances of vendors and speakers and those other things. And they're really drawn to it. It was how I built very fast a network of some of the most influential people in the state by not going to other people's networking events, by really going a different direction.
Brilliant. I love it. And I have to say, as somebody who consumed fair amount of those networking events, I stopped going years ago as well. And I realized this is definitely, in so many ways, just by me being seen there, and seeing some people that I know or new ones that I meet, but not being strategic about it, it's definitely not the best use of my time, and also not of the service to the others, because most of the time, can I really help others? So I'm assuming that is how you also created the subgroup of the CFO 100, by bringing top CFOs in Colorado together and then helping them out to pivot and learn from each other as well, just to get to know each other.
Yeah, a fair number of the CFOs participate in CXO also, but for different reasons. They go to CXO event to meet kind of a broader network of just interesting and influential people, but they wanted the CFO group to really have access to their high-level peers in a way that they weren't getting with the other CFO groups in town. Typically, what you find in these HR or CFO or CMO groups is it's mostly lower level leaders and a lot of unemployed people. And there's still value to be created for those individuals participating, but it gets really hard to garner the interest and engagement of the senior most people in an environment like that. They don't get as much value. So we really set the rules. We said, hey, this group is for the CFOs, the highest level finance executive only of the 100 largest public and private companies in the state. That's those are the only people that qualify. And if you become unemployed, you can hang out with us for 3 months, and then you got to go to this group that's just going to help you land your next job, and then you can come back. But it was pretty strict rules, but what happened is I got engagement by almost every CFO of every major company because they knew what to expect when they showed up. It was clear, who was going to be participating.
Brilliant. Again, finding phenomenal solutions, and even people in transition finding other avenues and ways, because it's just, again, another CFO will not be able to find you the job. You need to go in other avenues to look out for that. So absolutely makes sense. And if you don't mind, you also created the HR 100, which I'm also really interested to learn a little bit more about it. I'm assuming from the very similar point of view as the CFO group.
Yeah, I started that one first. We already had about 40 chief HR officers in CXO, and there was an interest in kind of having a subgroup among them where they could get together once in a while and just take turns hosting and keep it pretty informal, but have the conversation focused on HR related things that they were working on to get peer feedback on. At first, I didn't think that was a good idea. I mean, we had a strong SHRM chapter in town, and SHRM is kind of the dominant HR or networking organization. Yes. And I really debated whether there was value in trying to compete with that. And so I actually met with some of the chief HR officers and asked them that question. And they said, I don't go to those SHRM events because it's mostly lower level HR people and a lot of vendors. and
yes,
and so
very predictable and very stuffy.
And so I said, okay, well, if we kept this to only the senior most HR executives of the largest employers in the state, would that be valuable? And they immediately said yes. I mean, that's what we ultimately want. The first year we started it, the chief HR officers of 80 of the 100 largest companies joined. And by the next year, we had all 100. And today, I think we're around 200. 100 largest public companies, 100 largest private companies. We have almost all of them. So it really has become the dominant chief HR executive organization in the state.
That is fantastic, specifically right now, obviously, because it's so much need with economic shift, with COVID, with remote work, with different way of finding talent, interacting, but also preserving the longevity of the company, right? So laws are changing, but in the same time, it is so important to really see what is working, and not everybody as yourself and your company is so technically savvy. You posting, you blogging, you are interacting, you're doing videos. And I also think that of coming from executive of your caliber, it's just so beautiful that you have also great digital footprint. And I feel like that a lot of organizations, due to regulations, feel like they cannot do many things. And on contrary, I see that as a result of your influence, a lot of them are actually shifting their mindset and contributing in such a much more meaningful way. So I just want you to know that, if you're not aware of it.
Thank you.
Absolutely. But Jay, I mean, my goodness, I was like, we're just scratching the surface here. But one thing that I am absolutely, as a humanitarian, as a huge human rights advocate, so thrilled actually to have a conversation with you about your influence board, because I'm assuming this became something after you established these other 3 entities. And just seeing again how this need and conversation brought phenomenal solutions. So guys, buckle up. You cannot miss what he's going to share right now about influence board.
You're right. It was a interesting natural outcome of managing all these networks of some of the most powerful and influential executives. And it's actually been a 10-year overnight success, as some people say about companies. It started 10 years ago. It was a CXO lunch where the executives were talking about and kind of complaining about the volume of sales calls and emails that they get on a daily basis. It's not uncommon for them to get 30, 40 emails and phone calls a day from vendors wanting to meet with them to sell them something. And it becomes a huge business distraction, and it's kind of a catch-22, because the executives know intuitively there is some value in there somewhere, but I'm not sure which 1% of the calls today I'm supposed to be paying attention to, because I don't have a filter. And the original idea they came up with over lunch was, okay, what if we could turn this business distraction into an asset of some kind? And what would that look like? And their thought was, what if we built a platform where every time I got an email from a vendor wanting my time that I could not pay attention to logistically, instead of ignoring it, I would forward it into this platform. And it would build over time a community of people that wanted my time. And then when I wanted to raise money for a charitable cause, I would auction an hour of my time to that community. And the winning bidder would get an hour of my time, and the funds raised would go to a charity that I designated. So it would become this asset I could tap into to increase my philanthropic giving and hopefully be exposed to missed innovation that could add value to my company as well. One thing we learned, so we ended up testing that because I thought it was a brilliant idea. One thing we learned quickly was the auction was a really bad idea. The outcomes we were getting were almost 100% of the meetings that got scheduled. The executive said, "Thanks for donating to my charity. You have an hour of my time. By the way, I don't need what you're selling, and I could have told you that in advance."
Wow.
They just happen to have the most money to win the auction, And so it was clear the auction was not a good filter for meeting relevancy. So we really ended up having to go a completely different direction when it comes to that. But
I love it, like how you do the trial and error and then quickly fix it. And something that you're creating now, which is again with pandemic, with virtual world, extremely beneficial. So I was checking your platform and I was blown away. The roster of some of the most prestigious, more influential, but also the most amazing minds, brilliant minds in different sectors available to access and schedule meeting with, knowing exactly what is the price tag, and that price tag is going to the charities and back where it's truly needed the most, because as we know, the demand and need right now from nonprofits and organizations is all-time high. So do you mind
yeah, this
sharing
is,
how that shift happened? Because I'm just like,
yeah.
I'm just blown away how amazing that is and how others can repeat that in their cities, in other parts of the world, and how we can actually bring together that all sectors, you know, corporations and nonprofits and government. And since you are navigating that extremely successful, which whoever worked in any of those three knows how challenging that is.
Yes, you hit the nail on the head. The model had to be a win for the executive, a win for the vendor, and a win for the charity. And we really needed to design a model where everybody got what they wanted out of it, and it was high value for everybody. And we landed on a model where the executives they set a fixed price for an hour of their time. They might say, hey, an hour of my time is $300. Here are the charities that money would support, that I'm passionate about. But then they clearly articulate in their profile, I'm interested in meetings on these topics, and I'm not interested in meetings on these other topics, so that it can do what the executives want, which is bring to light innovation and ideas around key areas of interest that the executive has at any given time. Because they needed that filter for relevancy for all these sales calls they're getting. It's great for the vendors because they can pre-qualify themselves right out of the gate and not waste time scheduling a meeting and paying, to a charity for a meeting that isn't going to be well received and hopefully move to the next step. We also made it free for the vendor to join, free for the vendor to submit meeting requests, and they really only pay if a meeting's accepted. And even when they pay when the meeting's accepted, we hold on to that money until the meeting's been successfully completed, so that if there's any problem, the meeting doesn't happen or anything, 100% refund back to the vendor. So extremely efficient use of business development dollars, only spending it when they're getting the outcome they want. And for the charities, it's a whole new bucket of money to draw from. It's converting vendor marketing dollars into charitable assets, and they need that right now. They need new ideas and new sources of income. So it's been very well received by them as well.
That is brilliant. Again, I'm just blown away. And again, guys, please, we'll have a links on the end and after the show and after the podcast. But I just wanted to make sure that everybody that is listening and watching, it's taking note of that, because a reason why I'm bringing this up, Jay, and how relevant and timely this is, so many people are trying to figure out innovative solutions. And we have here blueprint for something that is already working tremendously well. You don't necessarily have to scratch your head and do too much of trial and error, and you can just follow and solve and create amazing impact that you were already doing. So with that in mind, just a quick note, I'm assuming that a lot of now events are done virtually, from CXO to all of these different groups that you mentioned earlier, Jay.
Yeah, each group has been a little different in their approach to taking risks. So the HR group is like, hey, we are not going to meet in person until maybe next year. And I get it. It's the optics of the HR leader, going to a meeting with other HR leaders when they're not allowing their employees to come to work. But some of the other groups, my CXO group and my CFO group, very different. I mean, we did some virtual events, and then we started to do hybrid events where we said, if you want to come in person, you can, but we're going to limit attendance and socially distance. And if you want to participate virtually, you can as well. And we had technology there so that the virtual attendees were up on the screen and could interact and just as though they were there. What we discovered was 3/4 of the people who registered wanted to be there in person. And that actually surprised me a little bit. But it also didn't surprise me. I mean, when they were so excited to just be there in person and see each other again. And we even had some events. We had some CFO events where it was just in person, and that's what they decided they wanted. So we had to keep the numbers down. For example, we had the CFO of a major restaurant chain wanted to host in one of his restaurants, and they have all these security protocols in place at the restaurant. And but yeah, so I'm a big proponent of hybrid events for a while. Come if you want, but we're going to kind of control things and attend virtually if you want as well. So you can attend either way.
I think that is a brilliant solution because, again, some people have a high risks or different situation in their homes that they have to be very cognizant about it. But then again, it allows everybody to decide what's the best for themselves. But I have to say, when we look at statistically, that over 50% of employees in general workforce is feeling isolated and not sense of belonging. I can just imagine how lonely and challenging can be up at the top with the C-suite because people are usually, having anywhere in smaller quorums conversations, but that importance to have the dialogue and interaction, I feel it's across the board very much so needed this time. So I'm glad to hear that. And for anybody that is specifically listening from Colorado that they think can fit with this category, I'm assuming you taking on applications for the new members and opportunities to participate. That's correct?
Yeah, I mean, really anyone who's a C-level executive of a company over 100 million in annual revenue or some other person of influence, that CXO would be a great group for them. The HR group and the CFO group, it's, really 100 largest public companies, 100 largest private companies, and their senior finance executive or their head of HR would fit in those organizations as well. And we don't have everybody, there's turnover, it's always a moving target. So always looking to have new people participate.
That's fantastic. So now with the shift to a little bit of the gears here, I'm very, very curious. Do you have a military background, or how did you get in acquiring military vehicles? Because I saw the photo and image that is like this monster 5-ton huge truck with the Rudolph Red-Nosed Reindeer nose, and it just made me laugh. So please tell me, how did you start having that hobby? What do you do with these vehicles in your free time?
I've never been in the military, but man, do they have fun toys. And I kind of fell into it by accident. I buy a lot of stuff on online auctions. And at the time I was buying some things from military auctions. They actually they were retiring gym equipment, in these nice military gyms. And, I got a $6,000 treadmill for $50 and had to put $75 into fixing it. So I got some great gym equipment and I needed a trailer for my truck. And I thought, well, I'll pick up one of these military trailers. They're so well built, just steel. And so I saw some on auction and I thought, well, man, these are going really cheap. And I bid on 2, hoping I would get one of them. And I won both of them for $170 a piece. And I thought, wow, how did they go so cheap? These things are just amazing. And then I went to pick them up and I realized my mistake. The picture of the trailer that you see on the internet looked like a normal size trailer, but I hooked this up to my pickup truck and it was a trailer to one of these 5-ton military trucks. And I was barely able to tow the trailer alone with nothing in it because it was so huge and heavy. And so it was really useless to me as a trailer. But I was able to get them home, and and so that got me thinking, well, now I need a truck that can actually pull this trailer. And so I started looking at the 5-ton trucks, and I probably looked for a couple of years before I found the first one. And and I got it for cheap. I mean, but it was in Fort Riley, Kansas, and I had to have a guy drive it out to Colorado for me. But it's a blast. People ask me, like you said, what do you do with it? And I'm like, I recently I used it to uproot a huge tree on my property that had died. I just wrapped a chain around the tree, hooked it to the truck, and backed up slowly, and it pulled this huge tree out by the roots. And then I was able to cut it up with a chainsaw. But we load the kids in it and just go to Dairy Queen. We dress up the truck for Halloween and Christmas and drive it around. We have hay bales in the back of it right now, getting ready for Christmas as well. So it's just fun. I mean, there's really nothing super productive I use it for. It's just a toy.
But that's very unusual, and thank you for sharing the story. I think it's super awesome to also show the hobbies and interests, and because we all have other sides to us beside our title and position and what we're doing, specifically on LinkedIn. And one thing that really I just caught my eyes, seeing your recent photo image with one of your exotic reptiles, and I was blown away. Again, being scared for most of the reptiles, I was like, you have a collection, I heard. So I was like, oh my goodness, I'm just curious again, how did you get into that, and what type of the most exotic reptiles do you have?
Yeah, I had bad allergies growing up, and so I never had dogs and cats. I always, had snakes and lizards and frogs. And I finally got to an age where I could get the more interesting ones, the ones that you couldn't find at a pet store. And so yeah, that you have to get them through breeders and other things. And I started with a collection of different types of pythons that I was crossbreeding to create unique colors and patterns in the offspring that don't exist in the wild. And there's a whole community of reptile breeders that do this, create these hybrid reptiles that look, a certain way that they would never look in the wild because of, selective breeding. So I got into that for a while. I've since gotten rid of most of my snakes. I still have a couple, but I'm now getting into lizards, large lizards. I have a 4-foot black and white Argentine tegu, which is the one you saw in the picture. Puppy dog tame. I have a leash for it. It goes on walks.
Oh my goodness, seriously? Oh my
yeah,
goodness.
it'll run loose in my office sometimes, and occasionally, crawl up into my lap seeking affection. And just a scaly dog. I have another mangrove monitor, a monitor lizard that also gets 3-4 feet long. We're starting to get into different types of chameleons. We just got our first panther chameleon, and I'm super excited about it. Considering maybe getting into breeding some chameleons as well. But we'll also have tortoises. I've got a sulcata tortoise, also known as an African spurred tortoise, that will get 100, 200 pounds. He's about 50 pounds right now. And so I've got about 1/8 of an acre, committed to a tortoise habitat to him on the property. We've got a red-footed tortoise as well. So they're fascinating as well, just personality wise, like tiny dinosaurs. But yeah, I've always been intrigued by that.
And Colorado is good home for them, because I know that they can get really over 100+ years old, right? Their age is could be even in some cases even
Yes,
thousands years old.
They will outlive me. And they'll end up in my will. So hopefully my kids know what to do when that time comes.
Wow, that is fascinating again. So it seems like I love how you were exploring different interests and passions, but also how you leverage not only technology and influence and things that you're doing, obviously professionally, but also what you're doing personally. So what is left in a bucket list of Jay Allen? Because right now I feel like you accomplished already so much, Jay. What is left to do?
Well, the other thing that happened 3 years ago is my home office got taken over by the Reptiles. It's now the Reptile Room, and I needed a new space. And so I bought a 30-foot school bus and drove it home from an auction. And my son and I spent a winter tearing out the whole inside and rebuilding it into a mobile home office that I'm sitting in right now. So it is my full-time office, is this 30-foot school bus that has nice wood floors and paneling and electrical outlets and heating and air conditioning. And it's parked about 30 feet or 75 feet from the house. So I get good separation from the kids. It's got its own phone number, its own Wi-Fi, and it's really been a great office for me.
That is fantastic. I would love to see, hopefully one day you can show us a little video or something, but that is fantastic because we need specifically when it's pandemic, when it's everybody in the home, right? In the house, when you needed that little break and separation, but that must be super cool, very creative environment to work from.
It's worked out well. There's a little gym in the back and the office in the front. And
oh my goodness, you thought about everything. That is brilliant. Wow. So as we're getting close to our full power hour, do you mind, Jay, sharing? Obviously, your legacy is already so extremely well developed and based on things you do to truly help and support others. Do you mind sharing what would you like to be remembered by, and what some cool projects or things that you can share are coming in years to come? I'm just curious where you're dedicating your energy and efforts, and what else would you like to accomplish in your lifetime?
I've always wanted to do well by doing good in some way. Building 10 different networking organizations over the last 20 years. I'm running that's never been a moneymaker for me. That I do that because I love it and I love the people. And that's one thing about networking is you have to treat people the same, whether they're valuable to you, kind of in quotes, or not. So whether they were employed, whether they were unemployed, whether they were in a position to help me, or not, you just treat them all the same. They're all people, and I've garnered tremendous relationships through that. And then the influence board, was another play on that. It's unique to have a for-profit company that only has one output, and that is funding nonprofits. So it's a really unique business model that we created that builds value for shareholders, but really does good in the world as its primary reason for existing. Right now, I'm not trying to take on any new projects, but what I'm seeing is the influence board is growing really, really fast. We've had a doubling every month in the number of meeting requests that are going into the platform. Our executives, the executives, we're up to 1,000 executives on the platform. We just started in January. Could exceed 5,000 before the end of the year. So it's growing fast from that perspective. The salespeople and vendors joining the platform are scaling at about the same pace. So I'm looking at spending more and more of my time running the influence board as things progress. And I'll be looking for ways to bring in help and support to backfill for me on the other projects that I have going on. But I'm excited about the potential that Influence Board has going forward.
Absolutely, and I can see reason why is rapidly growing and expanding, because not only the virtualization, but the ways of identifying pain points and trying to connect with the right people not only saves the time and increased efficiency, but some organizations in dire need, and they need the resources or solution right now. So that definitely expedites that whole process. So again, kudos for creating that. That is phenomenal. And in the closing, Jay, what would you like to leave with our viewers and listeners? Because you share so many golden nuggets and great blueprints of how to create organization that creates so much impact. But anything else from all those years of experience that you would like to let them know?
I'll leave you with this. When it comes to networking, there's something that you can do that's really easy that nobody does. And it's what I say, if you never met another new person, how could you be a better networker with all the people you already know? And years ago, I started a monthly networking lunch where I could just invite a subset of all the people I have known over the years to meet together and introduce them to each other. And so it wasn't awkward for me. I'm just inviting people I already know to the lunch, but it's a diverse group of people that I know that have never met each other. And we spend the whole lunch catching up and introducing them to each other and finding ways for us to help each other. And it's a great way to just start networking in a way that doesn't involve reaching out to any strangers. And if you can become really good at that, then it translates well into now growing your network of new people as well. And so I encourage people to start a monthly lunch where you invite 10 people that you've known over the years, from church, from school, from previous jobs, people that sold you stuff, whatever that is, and start to create community among them and help them meet each other as kind of the hub of that networking activity.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you, Jay, again for your time and opportunity to share with us. And listeners and viewers, please take notes because you have a lot of great golden nuggets here.
Thanks,
you.
Izabela.